Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. The world of pop culture fandom was once on the fringes of society. Comic books, anime, and sci-fi movies have historically been seen as the realm of nerds living in their parents' basements. But in recent years, the power dynamics have shifted, and what once was considered niche is now very much in the mainstream. Blockbuster movies are increasingly being dominated by superhero and fantasy genre, and that's seeping into the world of prestige television. And everything from Labubus to the latest Nintendo Switch console are flying off the shelves in ways that are taking their makers by surprise. To unpack why this side of pop culture is proving so popular, we're joined today on the front page by the Academic Dean at SAE Creative Media Institute, Dr. Lorna Piatti-Farnell. So, Lorna, I want to start with something that's close to my heart, at least for now. That's Labubus. For those who don't know what these actually are, how would you describe them?
Oh, Labubus, absolutely. Well, Labubus are dolls, I suppose, or plushes, depending on how one wants to look at it. And they've been described as little elvish creatures, and they're definitely inspired a little bit by Nordic folklore. They are fluffy, and they come in a variety of colors, and they have intended associated personalities. Some of the key features that make them stand out are these big wide eyes and mischievous smile, and they've got very toothy grins, which are very cute. They've been released in different collections, and each collection has been characterized by various different outfits, different facial features, different accessories. And I suppose that's what makes this collection drop really unique. And what is also unique about them is that they're released in limited numbers. So they are highly collectible. And to some extent, that is actually what has made them popular over the years. And really what truly people go for is that they're really hard to get. But that adds to the excitement for potential buyers, and there's definitely a layer of prestige that comes from owning the latest and being able to share pictures in places such as Instagram. This reflects positively on the identity of the owner and definitely gives them points in the community. But also one thing that is particularly important to me is that this Labubu phenomenon seems to transcend age.
Well, they've just become such a sensation in recent weeks. There have been reports of hours-long queues overseas to buy them, and even here I've heard that you have to get to the Westfield really, really early, and even reports of some fights breaking out in malls in the UK over who's going to buy these Labubus.
Well, get this. In Britain, consumers are going crazy over the Labubu plush doll. There's been crowd shoving and reports of fighting in the long lines waiting for the collectible. The distributor has since halted in-store sales across the UK. Online purchases are still available. Labubu has exploded in popularity since coming out in 2015.
Are you going to get one?
I mean, how can I not? I mean, if it's that popular, I might as well get in line, and I love saying it. So That's a bonus as well.
What I think is interesting as well is that you buy them and you don't know what color you're going to get. So there's that added mystique around it.
Yes, absolutely. They come in blind boxes. So truly, it makes that whole collector's value even higher, because you need to try and buy more and more and more to complete the latest release collection. But then, you don't know what you're going to get. So the possibility that you may get more, of the same one is higher and higher. And you have to bear in mind that the moment something becomes very collectible, the price goes higher too. And while they may retail at a reasonable price, let's say reasonable, once they're open and once they're a particular color or a particular facial expression, particularly if it's a rare one, then it gets resold. And that's when the price really goes up. And that's where the collectability, value gets higher and higher. And, like you can see like internationally, on platforms like eBay, Labubu dolls going for incredible prices, but that's part of the chase. And that is part of the prestige that comes with owning those rare dolls that no one else has in the community.
I was trying to explain this craze to my mum, and she came back at me with, so they're like Beanie Babies or Tamagotchis. And I was like, yes. So these crazes, they are cyclical, aren't they? They do happen over generations.
Absolutely. Popular culture trends, they go in cycles. Things go in and out of popularity. They may be similar items, like in this case, plushes or dolls, or they may be completely different. They reach a peak and then more often than not, they either flutter away completely or they become, part of sort of subcultures. They still have an interest in there, but the mainstream doesn't give them as much attention. Now, what these trends actually do, they tend to either both, shall we say, reflect, but also shape people's expectations of what is fun and what they do for entertainment. And they often become very much associated with particular contexts and particular objects. Now, this can range from wearing certain clothes to owning certain items to even playing certain games or even engaging in particular pastimes, etc. And bear in mind that, as a side note, there is something to be said for personal preferences that don't necessarily have anything to do with popular cycles and trends, but sometimes they mix and merge in the middle. So there is an aspect of trends that has something to do with feeling included and doing what feels cool, shall we say, especially big global popular trends, including watching certain shows or eating particularly Instagrammable foods, which is one that I definitely indulge in particularly. But at the same time, when it comes to trends, there is also an aspect that is connected, shall we say, to self-expression, which sociopolitically and culturally often goes way, like beyond, popular culture practices. It's about how people see themselves, in these objects and in these activities. Now, popular culture, especially in fandom spaces, does provide platforms for individuals to express their personalities, to express their interests and their values through owning particular objects, sharing particular pictures, playing particular games, like listening to particular music, and so on and so on. So trends can be expressions of identity. That's why they continuously come back in different forms, regardless of they might be, including in the content creation space, which of course attract a lot of viewers and generate a lot of engagement.
There is a sort of infantilization to all of these things, to sort of wanting something like that, I think, in your 20s. And this is not, I'm not saying this as a judgment. I've talked before about cosplay and how that sprung up in Japan after the 1990 financial crisis. That retreat in a world that's basically failed young people, and I really do believe it has, the retreat into childlike things and to comforting things and little treat in the absence of being able to sort of have any wider purchase on society, I think is linked.
I was listening to another podcast about Labubus, and they brought up the lipstick index, how in tough times we buy affordable luxury items or something that makes us smile in order to make ourselves feel better. Is that a bit of what's happening here? Are Labubus a sign of economic turmoil?
Well, that is a very interesting question. And the lipstick index is an interesting phenomenon in itself, or alleged phenomenon. And I wonder if perhaps we can give a little bit of background to this. The lipstick index is an economic theory suggesting that sales of affordable luxury items like lipstick or other cosmetics increase during times of economics or political hardship, or both. Now, the term, I believe, was coined by Leonard Lauder, as he apparently observed that lipstick sales seemed to rise during and around, at the time, the 2001 global recession. Now, this often has been discussed in terms of it being a happiness index. like that one buys in order to feel happy. But it's not quite straightforward as that, I don't think. It operates in similar terms with what we said about, owning the Labubus or other, particular, the Beanie Babies, other particular, trendy items. The idea that we can own something that is different and it is unique, and in terms it makes us feel unique, even for just a short period of time. It feeds, even cosmetics, they can feed into a sense of well-being by being associated with ideas of beauty or maybe cuteness, which of course are culturally constructed ideas, but that's by the by. And those inevitably are connected once again to ideas of self-expression and ultimately belonging and acceptability. And I think a lot of the time with these trends, that's what it comes down to. That idea, that feeling of belonging, of being part of a community and of standing out, within the community, that inevitably is associated with a sense of happiness.
How much does this have to do with escapism? I've been interested to see actually the lineup of movies coming to cinemas this year. We've already had 2 Marvel movies and still have a Fantastic Four movie to come. We're also going to get a new Superman, a new Jurassic World. So are we just watching all these movies in order to not think about the world as it is, I suppose? Or is that just what the movie industry has landed on?
Well, I would say that escapism certainly plays a significant role in many popular culture crazes and fads or viral practices or preferences, including for genres such as fantasy or sci-fi. But it is not the only factor at play. Now, escapism, like you rightfully say, can be a way to cope with stress in difficult times. And that does come into our current global situation for sure. But popular culture is often driven by a variety of complex interplays of social, economic, and even psychological factors. And these include a desire for connection and for that sense of community. So we participate in these practices to feel part of the group. Now, on the note on genres such as sci-fi and fantasy, which, superheroes broadly belong to, they give us an opportunity to live in a different world for a while, to escape, to experience something remote from our everyday situations. And in so doing, I guess they stimulate our imagination, but beyond what we know. And they're often highly entertaining. So the appeal is easily explainable in those terms. And we can see why film and episodic media producers have engaged with these genres even more in recent times. Now, sci-fi and fantasy in particular are quite subcultural as well, but they have exploded into the popular culture scene. And they can be sources of revenue beyond the media themselves. Avid fans of fantasy and sci-fi are also well known to indulge in collectibles, in merchandise, and in other activities connected to the movies and to the series. And this, once again, it really goes down to that feeling that we are owning a piece of our favorite films and our favorite series, of our favorite genres. And it makes us feel unique sometimes. It makes us feel different. It makes us stand out. But most importantly, there is an identity and community aspect that comes with that. And sci-fi and fantasy are perfect examples of how the community can really give that sense of belonging through a media genre.
And it's interesting as well, I think, because that's also cyclical. Like Superman movies came to the big screen at the end of the 70s and Batman came back in the early 90s, and those genres are coming around every few years or so. I've actually also noticed how this trend has seeped into television. So the Hollywood Reporter is predicting that 3 of the best drama nominees at the Emmys this year will be Severance, The Last of Us, and Andor. So that's a trippy sci-fi series, a video game adaptation, and a Star Wars prequel.
Welcome to the rebellion.
So the studios must know that this is what people want right now.
Well, absolutely. And bear in mind that, especially sci-fi, but also fantasy, historically, they tended to be relegated sort of to the margins, like of the popular culture scene. You had these avid followings that some people thought they were a bit weird, not very fair, but that was the idea. Or perhaps fantasy was seen as too much for children, fairy tales, Disney movies, that kind of thing. But, in recent years, there has been a little bit of breaking of those boundaries. And even something like superheroes that would have been just seen as sort of low-level entertainment have really exploded into the big popular culture scene. And they have moved, from just the cinematic scene into television, into streaming episodic media, and the audience has grown immensely. It used to be just to the side, while now it's truly mainstream. So definitely there is an idea that trend, those fantasy trends and those sci-fi trends have gone beyond the confines, if you wish, of the cinematic medium and truly spread across our popular culture practices. Well, one thing that's allowed this to happen is definitely streaming services. The fact that we can have so many different genres and, experiment with different genres. It started with Netflix, and of course we have so many different ones now, where truly there is a lot of experimentation and we can cater to so many different tastes across our audiences. So that availability and that accessibility has definitely allowed genres such as sci-fi and, fantasy to become a lot more popular in recent times.
Bragging that you're all about the Marvel Universe is like boasting that your mother still pins your mittens to your sleeves. You can, if you want, like the exact same things you liked when you were 10. But if you do, you need to grow up. I'm not glad Stan Lee is dead. I'm sad you're alive. And by the way, if someone says you're being childish and you react by throwing a tantrum, you're not Iron Man. You're Irony Man.
One of the criticisms of, buying Labubus or video games or going to watch the new Superman movie is that it is a bit childish. So the likes of Bill Maher would tell us to all grow up and act like adults. Is there a bit of regression here, Lorna? Do we need to grow up? Is it bad for the world that we're spending all of our money on these ugly little Chinese trolls?
I see. Growing up. Who wants to do that? Well, you see, I think there is often, arguably, a misplaced belief that if something is entertaining, if something is engaging individually or as a group, if something is playful and it makes us happy, even for just a period of time, then it is childish and not proper to adult life, But we need to be, I think, a little bit careful here, because popular culture shows us that, that games and collectible and fantasy films or, just fun and involved activities such as LARPing. They're a great way for individuals to express themselves, to let them feel part of the group, to enhance their feeling of belonging and to pass the time in terms of hobbies as well. And truly, in our post-pandemic and hyper-digital world, I think there is an ever-growing need for connection, for feeling part of something, and, just not feeling alone. So, engaging in these activities or attending fandom events definitely can be part of that too. We still need to exercise a little bit of caution to make sure that everyone is safe and well-being must always come first. It is central, I think, to acknowledge how popular culture trends and practices, from watching fantasy and sci-fi to buying Labubus, can be very meaningful to people. They cannot be dismissed, especially in times of hardship, where, the support of the community and feeling like we belong and feeling part of something is very important.
Well, I'm going to take my adult money and go buy myself a Labubu.
Absolutely. We can all indulge in something that makes us happy for a little while.
Thanks for joining us, Lorna.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Ethan Sills and Richard Martin, who is also our sound engineer. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.